Hey, 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 Dr.Minesha here, affectionately known as Dr. M, and I want to cordially invite you to the Peace Driven Leader Lounge with none other than Miss Becky. Hey, Becky.
Hey, Dr. M, how are you
Becky
today?
with the long hair. Has anybody teased you and said that? So, before we get started, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you, Becky. I want to welcome all of those who are listening for the very first time. You can tell already that we are some powerhouse leaders who connect here, but we like to have fun. We like to live a little. We like to enjoy life, and we like to be real. So, if you are real and you're looking for leaders who are like minded, who share the same values, who understand that exceptional leadership is not just tied to a salary. It's not even tied to a title. It's tied to how you show up and lead in every area of leadership. And I often speak about the 8 domains of leadership. If you haven't followed me, definitely subscribed. Check me out at drminesha.com for those who are new. And most of all, our app, I Lead, We Rise, have just launched this quarter. We're super excited. It goes live officially this year in the summer. We will be doing a campaign where we're going to be getting so many leaders who can connect to what it's like to have everyone pulling at them because they're high value and they're in demand. Right. My other friend says, you got the juice. Good leaders got the juice. Everybody wants some of it. Right. And so, because of that, we have to make sure that you are not the stabilizer. We want to shift you from being the stabilizer to orchestrating stabilization. And that is the type of global conversations we have in the Peace Driven Leader Lounge in the practical ways that looks like the ups and downs, the highs and lows of leadership and how we show up as the orchestrator of stabilization. So with that being said, I would love to welcome you to the Peace Driven Leader Lounge with Becky. So good to have you, Becky.
It is so amazing to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Now, before we get into the conversation, I would love for you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little context behind your family dynamic and some of the things that you've been able to achieve thus far in your journey.
Absolutely. So, I am a school board member. So, yes, I dabbled into the world of politics. I'm on year 4 of that. I
Yay. Must
yeah,
be fun.
well, it's interesting. It is interesting. Yeah,
Good
we'll see.
word. Good
We'll see.
word.
That's another conversation. Um, I have spent 10 years on the board of directors of an international rare disease nonprofit. But
Mm.
my favorite achievement is being mom to 4 amazing kiddos. As of right now, they are 23, 14, 10, and 4. Yes, on purpose.
Wow. Ooh, we have definitely some multiple ways that this conversation can go. Thank you for your service. First, just showing up in the community. I believe that those who are called to the youth of the world, the next generation, really have a special calling on their life. And it's leaders like you that help to shape our world today. So I want to say, I appreciate you just for showing up for our youth in the way you have, for sure. And I want to talk a little bit about your member, your involvement as a board member, because as a charitable organization, CEO and founder myself for 12 years, I realized that serving on the board is such a different landscape than those who are boots to the ground, but they both serve an intricate part of, the work. And so I would love to hear some of your experiences because as different leaders, and usually when they're serving on the board, they're coming from different industries, different worlds, and they both just happen to share a common passion for the work and they come together. So that in itself is really interesting dichotomy to have all of these people coming together that really have one major thing in common. And they have to learn to work together and come up with policies and governing topics that impact the work without necessarily being close to the work. So tell us what's coming up for you right now because it's all in your face. I'm looking forward to what would you like to add to that experience for you?
Oh, yes, and like you said, it's so true. I think the difference between where you come from. So with my background in psychology, I've worked corrections, I've worked mental health. I am a
Mm,
life coach, but then being a school board member in the district where my children attend school. So I
mm,
have been the boots on the ground, being the PTA mom, doing all the things, and then coming in with my board member hat and having
mm.
capacity to be able to switch from one to the other. Because when I walk into that boardroom, I'm not the Becky mom. I'm Becky the
Whoa.
member.
How do you talk about that switch, the switching of the roles and what that looks like for you? Because I know you have to tell yourself, what is your brain processing when you shift, when you make that shift?
Well, I will say it's very easy. And I say this to, my administrators and the teachers and all the people I interact with on a regular. I was like, when you see me in the pickup line, that's mom Becky. That's the one that rolled out in her PJs and drove her kids to school today. When you get board member Becky, obviously I'm put together, ready to go. But it absolutely is, it's a state of mind. It's like, okay, I need to leave my personal feelings at the door. And you are governing, like you said, for the good of the whole. Do I absolutely draw on my experience as a parent? 100%, just like anybody would draw on their experiences in their different arenas of life. But like you said,
Mm.
it is definitely that coming together as a board because an individual does not have power in and of themselves in that way.
Yeah, for sure. I love that so much. Now, how did you deal with what I call the difficult personalities that, come on the board? Because I feel like you have these personas of people that are on the board. You have the one that is really there because it makes the organization look good because their title is really good. And, you have those who don't really do much, don't even really say much, and but they show up. They show up to almost every meeting, but they're not necessarily verbally contributing. Then you have some who financially give. And sometimes because they financially give, they feel like that somehow gives them some sense of entitlement in their opinion on every topic because a lot of times our society just puts a heavy weight on monetary contributions. And then you do have those people a lot like you who are doing that hybrid where they show up, but also oftentimes they're boots on the ground as well. And sometimes they're the ones that's most talkative and most passionate that sometimes it's harder to keep the main thing, which is policies and governance, which a lot of people don't really realize that when you're in charge of organization, like the topic, it should be just governance. That's the primary role of the board. So how do you navigate all of these personas?
I will say I have an unfair advantage. Like I said, I have used every tip, trick, tool I have from my psychology degree. I, I have used I was raised by a narcissist. And
Ooh.
be surprised at the amount of narcissistic personalities you will find on boards, unfortunately.
Mm,
So definitely drawing on that experience. But I think first and foremost is trying to have empathy from where the individual is coming from, even those with the tendencies that you may not like particularly very much, but realize that looking at them with love and empathy, and again, even if they're doing
that's so
something
good.
you absolutely cannot stand and would scream from the rooftops against, taking that moment to understand their position and where they're coming from. And while you might not agree, you could at least understand and be respectful.
Oh, that's awesome. I would love to talk about systems, and then I want to get more diving into just your work. And so, what are some of the systems that you felt like you had in place that helped you in your agility, basically, to serve on the board, to be the mom, and all the other responsibilities that you have?
100% resilience and doing the work that I needed to do on me. And it was realizing I can't change that individual on the board. There's certain things that are just out of my control. So it's what can
Mm,
I control? Obviously, my own reactions, my own behavior, getting therapy myself, getting coaching myself, reaching out to mentors when I needed that. That's the
mm,
part that honestly kept me sane for all of
mm.
it, all of it. If not, I could never have gotten to this level. Um,
Wow. You know what I hear when you hear you say that? It's like the epitome of self-care. Like that is like the thread that I'm hearing in terms of your superpower. It was like you knew that in order to pour out, that you needed to prioritize pouring in. And I think that we limit self-care to getting the hair done, looking polished and the external things, but that inner work, the therapy and taking those times for yourself, mind, body, spirit, and making sure that you were good. It really does put you in a posture to be empathetic because I don't really, as natural as it's supposed to be, when we're talking about humanology,
Mhm. Yeah.
it's not as natural as, we would like to think. And so putting yourself in places where you're good, where you're getting poured into actually gives you an advantage because you're more likely to tap into that empathy, which explains how you've been able to serve as long as you have and still look as beautiful as you do with 4 children.
Yes, no, thank you. Really care, and I remember the first time I got on an airplane as an adult and being a mom, and they said, "You have to put your oxygen mask on first." And I was like, as a mother,
Mhm.
I was like, "No, I would never. I have to put on my child." Like, it was a whole thing with
Mm.
my husband, and a couple years later, I'm like, "Yep, I get it,"
Get it
because
now.
that
Yeah.
advice that you get, like you said, where it's just the bubble baths or the nails done,
Yeah.
plenty of people who look together and are beautiful on the out
Oh, my, you're talking good.
but are ugly on the inside, and
That's
I have
right.
met far too many that way.
Yeah, yeah. They're hurting on the inside. They're strained on the inside. They are desperate for relief. you know? And that's one of the reasons why I love that, just opportunities to talk with leaders like yourself who are in the weeds, who understand what it's like and can hold space and, give legacy level insight. That's what I call this, because the more conversations we have about our lived experiences, the more people can see models of what it looks like because otherwise it's just hustle and bustle. So tell us a little bit about the work and how you got into the work that you're in. You mentioned being a life coach. What specifically do you support leaders in doing?
Specifically, I work with high achieving men and women who've had toxic and narcissistic parents, and we do find them in leadership roles very frequently
Mm,
because
mm,
they keep achieving in order to fill that hole that they
mm,
don't have from the parental, the love, the support, the appreciation. That was me.
mm.
That
Tell
was
me
me.
more about that. That's interesting. Very interesting, actually. Because I'm thinking about not just parents, but I'm wondering even people who married a narcissist and how that connects with the way in which they show up. And is there any hope in how you can counteract that environment and move into a different state or begin the healing process? You know, what does that look like? What does that even look like?
I will say for me, when you have someone who has a true narcissistic personality disorder, I don't want to say it's impossible because nothing is
So
impossible.
many people say that. That's why I was like, that's intentionally why I asked you that.
Yeah.
Because literally it's almost like this. I know I need to give hope, but I also want to I'm admonished to really tell you, like a person that has stage 4 cancer, you got to go back in there and give them the news. Like, what is that, Becky? Why is that? Because they have to be aware first, and no narcissist would ever be aware of their behavior?
Yeah, and they lack empathy, quite frankly.
Yeah, yes,
They just
yes,
completely and totally lack
yes,
empathy, so no,
yes.
they are not aware. For them, for those of us who try to put boundaries in place and try to call them
Yeah.
out on behavior, we're the problem. They're not the problem.
Mm,
So, I mean, there are people who have narcissistic personality tendencies. They
right.
have some level of awareness, and with therapy and help, they can definitely come around. But true narcissists, no. And then it becomes a point where it's like, I need to preserve myself in order
Yeah.
to continue to function, whether that's,
How do so
yeah,
so I need to preserve myself in order to continue to function. What statement is that? Is that for the person that is the narcissist, or is that for the person who's engaging with the narcissist? Who's saying that?
that's the person who's engaging with the narcissist. The narcissist would never
Right.
say anything like that.
Right.
Narcissist is like, you're the problem. It's you. Everything would be fine if you just did X, Y, and Z, is
Yeah.
generally what you'll hear come out of their mouths.
So in my mind, right, I am very solution forward. And it's been challenging for me because I do have, people in my life, like many of us. I'm sure we can name one or two people in our circle of family members that we can see have these signs of narcissism. And the blend between loving you, honoring where you are, and having my boundaries in place so that I can, you know, grow and thrive in peace. Outside of boundaries, is there anything else that you found to really help, especially if you're in relationships where it's like your children's father, like you said, your mother or your mom, like these are close relationships that you would typically want to have some, healthy interactions with. What could that look like?
I mean, for me, I will say truthfully, I went no contact with my father 7 years ago.
Wow.
And that was the best thing that I did for myself
Oh, wow.
because I spent my entire life. We went through periods of no contact, and I'd let him back in, and I would attempt to put boundaries in place. And it got to a level with us. And I always say this about boundaries too, particularly when dealing with these types of personalities. There's a difference between a request and a boundary. And you may think you're putting up a boundary, but you're just asking them, like, please don't do that.
Mm.
This personality, you're going to want to say, if you violate this boundary, there's going to be a consequence to you doing so. And that's what they really need. And then you have to follow through because it's not making empty threats. But for me, in that instance, after so many cycles of doing that over and over again, I did have to go no contact. And that is a whole different level of grief and healing. And
Yeah, imagine. So with your kids, right, and that being their grandfather, how did you navigate that? Because, they're different ages, so they may not have an understanding of what narcissism even is. And to just cold turkey cut them from their grandfather, that would seem a bit harsh if I was a child, not understanding that. So how did you navigate that so that they could also understand that it was in their best interest without them fully being aware?
yeah, and I will say it depended on the age level of the child at that time. And because I have that age range, my oldest was already a teenager at the time.
Yeah.
So he was pretty cognizant of a lot of the things that were going.
Yeah, for sure.
That was a different conversation. And I will
Mhm.
say, again, because we had gone through these cycles of being no contact and not, they honestly were never, my parents were never consistent figures in their lives. So for them,
Mm,
okay, status is normal. Now that my younger children are getting older, they've asked these questions. Now I
of
will
course.
never bash, my parents, but I'll say, I usually point to one specific situation. Um, and in my case, because one of my children has a rare disease, some of
Mhm.
their behaviors were directly impacting her health.
Exactly. So how did you navigate that?
Yeah, so that's why we ended up going no contact. It was like, if you can't come to my home and respect that you can't have a cigarette before you come into my home, you can't come to
Mm,
my home.
right.
So for me, it was very cut and dry. It's like
Yeah.
this child has a health issue. You're violating the boundary.
Right.
This is
Yeah.
kind of where we're at.
Right. So that in that situation, it does make it a little bit more easier, not from your standpoint, but just logically.
Mhm.
Like, I imagine for those people who, when they're doing behaviors that just make you feel uncomfortable, they're outside of your values, that are not necessarily a health issue, can get a little, tough because,
Yes.
to justify to other people. But I do believe that it's just as important when you're not in your whole self and you're with someone that is pulling that out of you, then it's safe to not put them in your space, period. Now, kind of tweaking this a little bit for those people who have a boss, that's a little more challenging because you see how you were able to control it very clearly. And even a parent mom, parent daughter relationship, you're an adult. But when you're going into a place of business that is paying your bills essentially, it gets a little more complicated. So, how do you navigate or advise that a leader navigates a situation like that?
Yeah, depending on the situation, because some of those situations can be very cut and dry as well. You know, if you have a boss who's engaging in sexual harassment, for instance, I mean,
Mhm.
it's just getting up the courage to go to HR and make that complaint because the organization itself already has those mechanisms in place.
Absolutely.
Where it's a little more, I would say, insidious, you
Mhm.
know, there are ways and little tips and tricks that you can deal with a narcissist generally for the most part. And I say this in all seriousness. Sometimes you just have to tell them they're pretty and move on and just stroke their ego and let things be their ideas. And I will also say it's
Mm.
not something that I would advise people to continue doing. I mean, if it's that serious where it's impacting your mental health, I think you can do that, still pay your bills, but also look for an exit strategy as well because that's not,
Mhm. A
physical health.
long term, yeah, that's not a long-term strategy as well. I
It's
love
not.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that so much. What are some of the greatest results that you find that your clients have told you in terms of your work?
They were able to stand up to their parents. They were able to
Mm.
show up with the proper visibility. And I think for me, the most satisfying was the client who was like, I just stopped yelling at my kids because they were bottling
Mm.
everything up. They were doing the work at work. And then by the time they
Mm.
got home, there was nothing left over for their family. Like obviously they had to pay their bills,
Absolutely.
they had to do what they needed to do. But then at home, because you're comfortable at home,
The
we
mask comes off.
exactly.
Doing yeah, so you go to work and you give them the best of you, and then you go home and you give your family what's left of you, which is very little. And
Yeah.
so I love that. And so that type of support is so necessary. And I believe the work that you do goes beyond just a leader because that's interconnected with the family.
Yeah.
You're literally building stronger families, you
Yeah.
know?
Absolutely.
And it's really powerful work that you're doing. I thank you so much just for sharing your insights. It's been beautiful to hear you speak for such a place of soberness and truth and wisdom. You know, the things that you shared today could only have been shared from implementation. And I feel like just now in such a day where we're inundated with information, it's refreshing when you can speak to someone who's done the work and doing the work and can come back and tell the story of how to navigate it because that's what we need. Leaders need more people who are showing up in empathy and who are leading with love and leadership. It's just as important as the leadership piece. And you mentioned your son and having special needs. I recently had a diagnosis for my youngest son. Two of my kids have, three of my kids have ADHD. One is getting another diagnosis, and the other one we just got back is autism. And so I am still navigating what that looks like. But before we land the plane in conversation, I just feel that you have something to share to those parents who just got the diagnosis, or maybe they had multiple kids and it was great. It was fine. They felt in control. They knew what to expect. The kids kind of had a similar, path. Um, and then here they are. Life throws them another child that just does not operate in the same way. And sometimes you can feel as a parent where you're not as competent or you're not as equipped, and you have to advocate and get the resources and all the things. And just emotionally, it can be taxing. Especially when you have the mindset that a lot of societal cultures have, which is leave the personal stuff at the door, and you have to come and and act as if everything is good. So what would you have to share to those parents who are navigating a child with special needs?
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. I have three of my children actually have special needs. So I have two with the ADHD, um,
Mm.
one child who has the rare condition. It's multi-systematic. So she's legally blind. She has albinism.
Mm.
It's a fatal disorder. Um,
Wow.
so always said, it's one thing when you take home your beautiful baby, and then for us, it was 18 months later. It's like she has a condition that ultimately will kill her. if a cure is not found, which we're still working on, which is how I ended up on that board. Um,
Yeah.
and then having other special needs children as well is how I ended up in the educational positions as well. But let yourself grieve, because you
Mm,
expected parenthood to be this one journey and you expected your children to achieve these things. Allow yourself that grief there. And then, quite frankly, you have a choice to make because you've already
mm,
been handed this. You can be angry at God, source, universe, all those things, or you can take that experience and again turn that into something beautiful. Which is what I chose. I grieved. I trust me, I had my whole railing against God and everyone else.
mm,
What am I going to do with this gift I've been given?
mm,
And that led me to leadership. That's how I ended
mm,
up on these boards. That's how I ended up being an advocate. That's how I ended up being a coach. So I could have laid down and said, I give up.
mm.
I can't take it. Or I can say, what am I going to do with this gift? And let me tell you that your children will be okay. My oldest is serving in the United States Marine Corps. My daughter, who is legally blind, is a published author at 14 and wants to go to law school when she gets older. And my other daughter with ADHD is like, there's nothing that she can't pick up that she doesn't master. So they will find their way and they will show you how strong not just they are, but you are too. Absolutely.
Wow. 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 Thank you so very much. Oh my gosh. I'm so full right now. You all, this is what the Peace Driven Leader Lounge is all about. We do such a disservice when we connect with leaders and all we know is what they achieved. Um, the real jewels comes from conversations that matter, like this, because that creates a place for us to pick fruit from your tree and to create this ripple effect of impact. And what I've heard is that your children really were the catalyst for your purpose and your calling. And I connect with that so strongly. So thank you so very much. I appreciate you. And thank you all for those who are tuning in and listening. You heard it here at the Peace Driven Leader Lounge. Remember to download the I Lead We Rise app where you get to hear from more leaders like Becky so that you know that you are not in this journey alone. Remember, it's not about how much you carry, it's about how well you carry it. And this is your community to help you do that well. Until next time, remember, peace driven leadership is not something you find. You won't find it, it doesn't exist. It's something you create. And this is your moment to create it. Until next time, bye bye for now.